They call me the In-Depth Detective. Hi, I'm the In-Depth Detective. Welcome to the show with that same name. This is the show where we take a look at the biggest mysteries, controversies, issues, failures, failed productions, failed or troubled developments of your favorite games, movies, shows, whatevers. Today, we look at a very interesting case. A case of a game that prior to its release was met with such unrealistic hype, and I'll say after its release was met with such unforeseen backlash. This is the case of Cyberpunk 2077, and subsequently, I guess also the case of CD Projekt Red. A company that prior to this was known for being so real and so consumer friendly, but ended up being the one thing they set out to destroy. So let's talk about it. Hi guys, DPX here, and today we look at the case of Cyberpunk 2077. Now before we get started, you know what to do. Check this video, subscribe if new, hit the bell, and leave a comment, or I'll get you cyberpunked. It was October 19th, 2012. The 7th generation of consoles, like the PS3 and Xbox 360, were a year off from getting their next installments after a long generation. While that was on the horizon, CD Projekt Red had announced the title of their new game called Cyberpunk 2077. Aside from that though, the trailer told us nothing. All we knew was that CDPR were making a new game called Cyberpunk 2077, and I mean, we can infer with the title that it was going to be set in a cyberpunk setting. Then a few months later, on January 10th, 2013, they dropped a trailer, which was all CG, and still didn't tell us much, if anything at all really. Regardless though, this would be the last we see of Cyberpunk 2077 for over 6 years. However, it is worth noting that during those 6 years, CD Projekt Red did not spend all their time working on Cyberpunk, as they also spent a lot of time on The Witcher 3, the third and final installment in the video game adaptation of the beloved novel series. And in addition, The Witcher 3 was released on May 18th, 2015 and was met with critical acclaim. Some calling it one of the best games of the generation, the decade, or even of all time. Now with The Witcher 3 getting critical acclaim and its DLC expansions which followed were also finished, CD Projekt Red were now able to work on Cyberpunk 2077. A game that, well, at this point, not too many people were talking about it unless they were talking about, you know, E3 predictions or games that were announced. And it's like, I hope this game isn't getting cancelled. Well, E3 2018 came along, and we found out it ain't getting cancelled. No siree. It was June 10th, 2018. E3 was happening, and it was time for Microsoft's showcase. From what I remember, it was big new game reveal after big new game reveal. Specifically games like Halo Infinite, Devil May Cry 5, Gears of War 5, Dying Light 2, Just Cause 4, the list goes on. But then, once the showcase was about to end, a trailer started up, and it said CD Projekt Red. And we got an awesome looking trailer that followed that. It also won many E3 2018 awards. Best Game, Best Xbox One Game, as it was at Xbox's showcase, Best PC Game, Best RPG, and so on and so forth. While the first-person perspective, in contrast to The Witcher 3's third-person perspective, had people pretty iffy, the gameplay demo at E3 was still well-received by the people who played it. Then E3 2019 came along, where the game was shown again with a lot more story details and stuff like that revealed, along with Keanu Reeves as a character in the game, and a release date of April 2022. Again, coming out of that E3, Cyberpunk was, and it's fair to say, the most talked about thing. But April 16th, 2020. Little did we know how much that would change. The year 2020 starts. It was exciting because it was the start of a new decade, and we had no idea that the world was going to burn down that year at that point. The year also started with us all knowing that Cyberpunk was set to release in April. However, during a bizarre week in January where a bunch of games like Final Fantasy VII Remake, Avengers, and Watch Dogs Legion, to name a few, from what I remember at least, were all delayed. Cyberpunk 2077 got delayed to September 17th, shortly afterwards. The given reason was for polish. CD Projekt Red claimed to have needed to make sure the game was the best it can be, releasing it when it was ready. But then, 2020 really kicked into gear. You know what I mean. Everyone was put into lockdown. Many stores closed. Many movies were delayed. Productions of other movies and shows were halted. Live sports were either on an off-season or forced to compete in front of fucking cardboard cutouts. And video games, while not as affected for the year as other mediums, did have one thing going against them. The games that weren't done. How are you going to finish them? So while we didn't see as many games getting delayed last year as we did movies or shows, there were many games that were delayed, whether it be, you know, just a few months or to this year. And we actually are seeing the lasting effects on the pandemic this year, because, well, this year hasn't been the strongest year for video games, we'll just say. I kind of got sidetracked there, but the reason I bring all this up is Cyberpunk was still being worked on during the pandemic, and it was still set to release in September. On top of all that, a massive amount of crunch was being dealt with over at CD Projekt Red, and it was bad. Months go by, and so do worries over whether or not Cyberpunk will make its September release date. And in June, we got our answer, and that was no. Cyberpunk 2077 was then delayed to November 19th. Again, the given reason was extra polish, and many assumed that COVID played a little into it, but some people were a little bit worried, because this was the third release date the game had within the first half of the year. Regardless, though, many people were still hyped for Cyberpunk as we got our first Night Watch, a Cyberpunk dedicated presentation where we got a lot of cool stuff shown, like the NPCs and stuff like that. Then a few months pass. It was the end of October. The game was just a few weeks from out and had just gone gold. In case you don't know what that means, when developers or companies say that a game goes gold, that usually means the game is finished. The game's all polished, it's set to release, basically. So imagine the surprises to everyone when Cyberpunk was announced to have gone gold, to then just like a week or two later, announced to get delayed again, this time to December 10th, 2020. Many people, including myself, were shocked. In addition to people being shocked, many people were upset now that Cyberpunk was delayed again, and even sent the developers death threats, which is fucking ridiculous and childish. But at this point, it was definitely cause for concern that the game was now on its fourth release date, but many people, myself included, still held out hope. After all, it wasn't even an entire month of a delay. Then, a few weeks later, the whole game gets leaked online. A lot of footage and features that weren't revealed, but not too many people were mad or anything. In fact, this seemed to drive up the hype a little more. Then, the remaining months went by, or weeks rather, and the review embargo was lifted, and the reviews were glowing. Review trades like IGN, Game Informer, Games Radar Plus, etc. all gave the game near perfect to perfect scores. However, not everyone did. GameSpot in particular stood out because they gave the game a 7 out of 10, which was quite different from what all the other reviewers gave the game. But there were some strange things as a part of the review embargo as well, though. Like, you were only allowed to use trailer footage instead of your own actual footage from your time playing the game. On top of that, every single review was of the PC version, which in hindsight we all know was the best version of the game, but was kind of strange at the time. And on top of that, reviewers were not even sent PS4 and Xbox One copies of the game. And even on PC, there were still many bugs that were mentioned in the reviews. But the reviews were still glowing. And even beyond the scores, what the critics were saying did in fact reflect the final score. But it was still a little confusing considering this bizarre review process. And then the game came out, and all the pieces kind of come together. Cyberpunk 2077 released on December 10th, 2020 on PC, PS4, Xbox One, and Google Stadia. And while it did actually come out instead of getting delayed again, it seemed that many people would have actually agreed that the game should have been delayed yet again. While people agreed that the PC version was the most playable, the PS4 and Xbox One versions were just giant buggy messes. I think now is when I mentioned that I actually played on the PS4 version, and I actually had a lot of fun with it. I guess there was one copy of the game that wasn't buggy and glitchy, and that happened to be my copy, but just want to say that. Say that every time I bring up this game. While many people agreed that the game did have many high points, specifically the story, the characters, side quests, and the soundtrack, the state of the game was just too much to ignore, and many people who even reportedly took off from their jobs to play this game didn't even finish it. And within a couple of months, everything for Cyberpunk and CD Projekt Red just got worse and worse. People found out that not only was the game released in a buggy state, but many features that were promised were not in the game. The aforementioned NPCs and being able to see their daily routine wasn't in the final game. The third-person cutscenes were replaced with first-person cutscenes, which made many people question what was the point of being able to customize your character in the first place. And that wasn't all either, because the feature where you get to purchase apartments, other combat features, the police, weather effects, amongst others, were all promised but not included in the final game. Then it was revealed that due to crunch, those features were removed to get the game out on time. CD Projekt Red encouraged unsatisfied players to request refunds, but this raised another problem. Because while, platforms like Steam and Xbox have rather lenient refund policies, PlayStation do not. In fact, they don't even have one. So when they were getting all these requests for refunds, they looked at it, and it was a lot. So they looked at it, and they're like, shit, we either need to change our refund policy or remove the game from the PS Store. And, well, they ain't changing their refund policy, I'll say that much. That's right, Sony straight up just removed Cyberpunk from the PS Store. Something that we've never seen anything quite like before. On top of that, it was revealed that the E3 demo was fake. And that's not even where it ends. It was then revealed that CD Projekt Red had lied to their investors about the game, so a lawsuit was filed and is still ongoing, at least at the time of recording. In the midst of all this, though, CD Projekt Red announced a DLC roadmap and said that the game would be at a better state come February 2021. However, it still gets worse. After an apology video from Marcin Iwinski of CD Projekt Red, they got hacked, and hackers fucked with the source code of the game and even allegedly sold the source code on the dark web. things just got worse and worse and worse for Cyberpunk and CDPR, and tarnished this once promising company. Like, how weird is this that CDPR, the company that was against studios like this, turned into one in the eyes of many? While Cyberpunk 2077 isn't the first game to have a crazy amount of hype behind it, then have such a disastrous launch, I can't think of any other game that had such a disastrous launch where things got this ugly. You look at games in more recent years that launched in similar states like Mass Effect Andromeda, No Man's Sky, or Fallout 76, but none of these games had all of the following: a bizarre review process, then come out, then have a shitload of controversy, then get refunded, then get removed from the PS Store, then have their investors sue them, then get hacked. This has never happened. A question that is actually harder than you might think is, what was the downfall of Cyberpunk? Like, what made it release in this state? And I feel like it's a mix of three things. A, the unrealistic hype. B, the over-ambitions. And C, the pandemic. Obviously, I think you were expecting me to say, oh, you know, just not delaying it again. But all three of these contribute to that. What the fuck? I've heard many people shrug off the pandemic argument, but really, you look at just how many games were not able to make it this year. And that's because a lot of games that come out, like, say, this year, get development done on them last year. So, if they aren't able to develop much for the games last year to come out this year, they're not going to come out this year. At least not a lot of them. And then there's the over-ambitions and the unrealistic amount of hype, which I'm kind of lumping together, actually, because the over-ambitions sort of is the reason why there was an insane amount of hype. CD Projekt Red promised a lot of things that they just could not deliver on, and the hype, even if this game did not release in such a state, the hype was a curse for the game's final product. Not all hope is lost, though, believe it or not. I know, it was just bad thing after bad thing, but not all hope is lost. I don't even know if you knew about this, but Cyberpunk is back on the PS Store. It's $50 as opposed to $60, but it's back. And CD Projekt Red went out of their way to hire community modders to help fix the game, which might be a little pathetic, and I kind of agree, but have you seen those mods? They might be onto something here. I do have hope for Cyberpunk, though. That's the thing that I feel I differ from a lot of other people, aside from the fact that I like the game, but I do have hope. And I'm all for, you know, a game should be the best it can be when it comes out. And if you want to add more content, you want to make it even better later on, go ahead. But that statement that Todd Howard said is complete bullshit. It does matter how you release a game, and I think it even matters as well how it ends up in the end, but it matters the most when you release the game. But the thing is with Cyberpunk is now this is the situation they find themselves in. Now if they want to make this game good, they're going to have to make it better. They've already released the game, and I feel like they could do this. I don't think CD Projekt Red are an evil corporation. I don't think they're like EA. I don't think they're like Activision. I don't feel like they're like Blizzard. I don't think they're like Konami. I don't think they're like any of them. CD Projekt Red, I have faith in them. But this is a lot to bounce back from. Lastly, I think there actually has been one good thing to come out of this whole fiasco that I think we can all agree on. And it's something I've kind of been alluding to for the whole video. Many games that were supposed to come out this year actually got delayed. Obviously, part of the reasons for the pandemic. But I don't think that's the reason for all the games. I think part of it is, you know, we've been telling companies release these games when they're ready for a while now. But now, they saw what happened when Cyberpunk got released when it wasn't ready. They saw just how messy things can get. And that's the lesson to learn from the Cyberpunk launch. Release a game when it's fucking ready. Anyways, that was this episode of The In-Depth Detective. This was a big one. There's a lot to it, so what do you guys think? Cyberpunk, did you like the game like I did? Or do you have hope that it'll get better? Anything about it, let me know in the comments below. Anyways, see you guys.